I found my name at a table in the back corner of my son's wedding reception, not near the family table, not near the people who mattered most to the bride and groom. I was seated beside 3 restless children, an elderly couple I'd never met, and 2 distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. At first, I honestly thought it was a mistake. Then my future daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "You're not really part of our new family. You're just helping pay for today." I looked at my son. He stood there beside her, and he said nothing. Not one word. A few minutes later, I stepped outside, pulled out my phone, and sent a short text to my attorney. Then I slid the gift envelope back into my jacket. Neither of them realized it at the time, but that single text message erased a gift that would have secured their future. Let me take you back to how it all started. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 71 years old, retired now, and a widower. Most of my life was spent running a construction company. It wasn't glamorous. I spent decades waking up before sunrise, working weekends, solving problems nobody else wanted to solve, and carrying responsibilities that never seemed to end. But it gave my family stability. My wife and I built a good life together. Not a perfect life, just an honest one. We raised our son, paid our bills, and built something we were proud of. When my wife passed away 9 years ago, everything changed. The house became quieter. Dinner became something I rushed through. Weekends felt longer. The person who helped me through that loss was my son. For a while, we became even closer. Every Saturday morning we'd meet for breakfast. Every football season we'd watch games together. Sometimes he'd stop by after work and sit with me on the back porch. We'd talk about work, life, repairs around the house, and whatever else came to mind. Those evenings meant more to me than he'll probably ever know. Back then, I never imagined anything could come between us. Then my son met Vanessa. At first, I was genuinely happy. She seemed confident, organized, and ambitious. Most importantly, she made my son smile. That's all a parent really wants. The first few months were fine. Then small things started happening. The kind of things that seemed too minor to complain about. I remember showing up to dinner one evening wearing an old leather jacket I'd owned for years. Vanessa laughed. "Harold, that jacket should have its own retirement plan." Everyone chuckled. I laughed too. It wasn't a big deal, at least that's what I told myself. A few weeks later, she joked about my flip phone, then my truck, then the way I still balanced a checkbook, then the music I listened to. Nothing was openly cruel, just enough to make me feel like I was always slightly out of place. Whenever I mentioned it to my son, he'd wave it away. "Dad, that's just her sense of humor. You're reading too much into it. Don't take it personally." So I stopped bringing it up, but the comments never stopped. Then something else changed. Started finding out about family dinners after they happened. Photos would show up online. Everyone smiling at restaurants, everyone gathered together. Everyone except me. Sometimes, I'd text my son and wait days for a reply. When he finally responded, there was always a reason. Work had been busy. They'd been traveling. They were exhausted. There was always an explanation, never a solution. I kept making excuses for him because parents do that. We don't want to see what's right in front of us. We want to believe things will go back to normal. The first time my heart really sank was when he canceled our annual fishing trip. We'd done that trip every year since he was 12 years old. Through college, through his first job, through breakups, through everything. 3 days before we were supposed to leave, he called. "Sorry, Dad. Vanessa's parents rented a lake house that weekend." I waited for the rest. I expected him to say we'd pick another weekend. Maybe next month, maybe later in the summer. Instead, there was nothing. The conversation simply moved on. That tradition ended in less than a minute. I remember sitting on my porch afterward, staring at the tackle box I'd already packed. It stayed there for weeks. After that, her family became the center of everything. Every holiday seemed to happen with them. Every gathering revolved around them. I was still invited sometimes, but it felt different. Like I was being included because it would look bad not to invite me. When my son proposed, I hoped things would improve. Instead, the distance got worse. Wedding planning began immediately. At first, I didn't mind being left out. It's their wedding, not mine. But then the bills started arriving. Dad, we found a better venue. Dad, the florist costs more than expected. Dad, we upgraded the photographer. Dad, Vanessa really wants something special. Every conversation somehow ended with a larger expense. And every time, I paid, not because anyone forced me, because I loved my son, because I wanted him to start his marriage without stress, because I thought helping meant I still mattered. One afternoon, he called about entertainment for the reception. We found something better. You already booked a band. I know, but Vanessa wants something bigger. I asked how much bigger. When he told me the price, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it cost more than my first truck. My son kept talking, while I stood at the kitchen window looking out into the yard. He sounded less like a son and more like someone pitching an investment opportunity. Still, I said yes. Months passed, checks were written, invoices were paid, and somehow the more money I contributed, the less visible I became. Then the invitations arrived. Opened one at my kitchen table. The names at the top belonged to Vanessa's parents. They were listed as the hosts, front and center. Looked again. Then again. My name wasn't there. Not once. The man paying for most of the wedding had somehow disappeared from the invitation entirely. When I asked my son about it, he shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa handled all that. That was his answer. No apology. No attempt to fix it. Just another excuse. By then, a part of me knew something wasn't right, but I kept pushing that feeling aside. The wedding week arrived. Friends congratulated me. Neighbors asked how excited I was. I smiled and thanked them, but deep down, something felt off. The morning of the wedding, I opened my safe and took out a large envelope. Inside were legal documents transferring ownership of one of my commercial properties to my son. It wasn't a small gift. The building generated reliable rental income every year. It could have provided financial security for decades. I wasn't giving it to him because he asked. I was giving it to him because he was my son, because I wanted him protected, because that's what fathers do. I slipped the envelope into my jacket and headed to the venue. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Watching my son standing there waiting for his bride, I felt proud. For a little while, all the hurt faded. Then the reception started. Walked into the ballroom looking for my place card. The family table sat near the dance. Vanessa's parents were there. Her siblings, several close relatives. Searched for my name. Nothing. I checked again. Still nothing. Then I found it. Table 19. The back corner. Beside children. For a moment I honestly thought somebody had made a mistake, so I walked over to Vanessa. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I think my seat might be assigned to the wrong table." She looked at me, then smiled. Not a kind smile. The kind of smile someone gives when they know exactly what they're doing. "Oh, that's not a mistake." I glanced toward the family table. Maybe there was some confusion. Several nearby guests had gone quiet. Vanessa folded her arms. "Harold, you're not really part of our new family." I felt every conversation around us stop. Then she added, "You're just helping pay for today." Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. The room suddenly felt very still. I looked at my son. He was standing right there. All he had to do was say, "That's not true." That's it. One sentence, one moment. Instead, he stared at the floor. That silence hurt more than anything she said, because her words came from someone who never cared about me. His silence came from someone who should have. In that moment, years of confusion finally came together. The ignored calls, the canceled traditions, the constant requests, the missing credit, the distance, the excuses. I suddenly saw everything clearly. They didn't want me in their lives. They wanted what I could provide. I nodded once and walked away. No argument, no scene, no shouting. I sat at table 19. I ate dinner with strangers. I smiled when people spoke to me, and halfway through the reception, I stepped outside. The night air felt cool. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to my attorney. Please stop the transfer immediately. Then I put the phone away. When I returned inside, the envelope stayed in my jacket. Nobody noticed. The reception continued. People danced. The photographer took pictures. To everyone else, it looked like a perfect wedding. But for me, something ended that night. Later, after most guests had left, I was walking toward the parking lot when a wedding coordinator approached me. She looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry about what happened earlier. I gave her a small smile. It's all right. Then she said something that stopped me cold. I honestly thought Ethan would have changed it after he approved the seating chart. I looked at her. What do you mean? She blinked. The seating chart. The final version was approved weeks ago. He signed off on every table assignment. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She immediately realized she had said more than she intended, but the damage was done. The last excuse I had for my son disappeared. Right there in the parking lot. This wasn't just Vanessa. My son knew. My son approved it. My son looked at that chart weeks earlier and decided his father belonged in the back corner. The humiliation had been planned. I thanked her and walked to my car. The drive home was quiet, painful, but strangely peaceful, because uncertainty was gone. The next morning my phone rang. My son, I answered. Morning, Dad. He sounded cheerful, excited. I already knew why. The gift envelope, he said. I couldn't find it. No, I replied. You couldn't. A pause. What does that mean? It means the gift isn't yours anymore. Silence. What gift? The property. The pause grew longer. Then he laughed nervously. Wait. What are you talking about? I explained calmly. The transfer had been canceled. The ownership documents were void. The succession plans had changed. The property would remain under my control. You can't be serious. I am. Because of where you were sitting? For the first time, I interrupted him. No. Because of years of disrespect. Silence. Then I asked, did you approve the seating chart? The line went quiet. I could hear him breathing. That silence told me everything. Finally, he said, Vanessa thought it would be easier. Easier for who? He never answered. The call ended shortly after. That evening, Vanessa called. Twice. Then 3 more times. I didn't answer. Guests started talking. People remembered what she had said. People remembered where I had been seated. People remembered that I funded the wedding. Word spread. For the first time in years, my son couldn't avoid the consequences of his choices. The months afterward weren't easy for him. I heard there were arguments, money, problems, tension, to blame. The property represented security, opportunity, a future, and now it was gone. I didn't celebrate that. That was never the goal. The goal was simple. If someone only values your generosity, they shouldn't be surprised when that generosity ends. 6 months later, my life looked very different. I traveled, spent time with old friends, visited places I'd always postponed seeing. Most importantly, I stopped chasing people who kept moving the finish line. One afternoon, I was sitting on a resort balcony overlooking the ocean. 3 old friends from my construction days sat around the table with me. We were laughing about jobs we'd worked 40 years earlier, stories we'd told 100 times for the first time in a long time. I felt at peace. Then my phone rang. My son. I watched it ring once before answering. Hi. Dad. His voice sounded different, softer. Less certain. We talked for a few minutes, not about money, not about property, not about inheritance. Then he finally said it. I lost sight of what mattered. I didn't respond. A few seconds passed, then he said, I'm sorry for how I treated you. Not how Vanessa treated me. How he treated me. That mattered. I've started therapy, he said, quietly. I know. I want to make things right. I looked out at the water. The waves rolled toward the shore. For years I had kept giving because I thought love alone could hold a relationship together. I know now that it can't. Not without respect. Respect isn't something I can hand back to you, I said. He stayed silent. It's something you have to earn and rebuild. After a long pause, He answered, I understand. When the call ended, I placed my phone on the table. One of my friends looked over. Everything okay? I smiled. Yeah. And this time I meant it. I wasn't waiting for someone to save me a seat anymore. I wasn't chasing approval. I wasn't trying to buy a place in my own family. The moment I stopped funding disrespect was the moment I got my dignity back, and that's something nobody can take away from me.